Hi, everybody. Welcome to the internet where things are streamed live. I'm Art News. This is the Ker-bloom's 25th birthday party. So there's a comment, or there's like a chat room, and I can see it. So if there's like questions, you can put stuff there. If there's like things that you want to see, I kind of tried to drag out as much as I could to have it visible, so that I don't have to run out of the room to get something. But if there was something that you wanted to see, I could try to grab it. Of course, I'm now seeing other things that I wish I had grabbed, but oh well. What else? If there's any, like, if you can't hear me or if there's some weird thing happening, you can say that in the chat also. Yeah, I have a cake. Someone's calling me, but it's just a robocall. So I have to, this is the first time I've really done some kind of live stream like this, and I have to, I did a short Instagram live thing yesterday, and kind of what I realized from that is I have to think about doing things live, but then also it's going to be recorded, and so it has to be sort of interesting for people watching it later. So maybe I'll just start talking, even though there aren't a whole lot of people here yet. So I started doing My Zine, Ker-bloom, in the summer of 1996. So it's 25 years this summer. I had always thought about doing a big, 25-year, quarter-century party, but then, the pandemic happened and I sort of forgot. And then suddenly it was like, oh, it's coming, and I can't have an event because we still kind of can't really have events. But then, someone suggested cake, and someone else suggested watching me eat cake. This is a cake on the internet. And so I kind of thought, oh, well, I guess that's kind of that's one thing that's sort of come out of the pandemic, for me at least, is that, online events are things that can happen and people from all over can attend them. So that's kind of neat. So you can sort of see behind me right here, this card rack, and it has zines in it. And I have, half of it has cards and then half of it has zines. And I sort of put those there. They're all the most recent ones. And I put them there so that when I get an Etsy order, I don't have to dig through boxes to look for something. I just sort of have all the recent ones there. So that's sort of where I keep things. Then I also have, the one thing about working in stationery is that it means I have a lot of envelope boxes, and everything in my life is kept in envelope boxes. But I bring this, I call it the archive, but it's sort of a box of zines that I bring to zine fairs, and it has some older ones. It's kind of neat because I can bring it to zine fairs, and people do the thing like it's records where they flip through, and occasionally they'll, for whatever reason, decide that issue number 35 looks good to them. And so that's where I kind of keep those. Then I think I can kind of turn this, and you'll sort of see that there's all of these card boxes with Post-it notes. So that's where I keep sort of ones that were, okay, so here, these are all boxes, envelope boxes, and they have Post-it notes, and that's where I keep back issues. So as you can see, I have so many back issues. And then I have other boxes for the really long time back issues that I still have copies of. Okay, so then what else? Okay, what else do people want to see? So for example, I have, this is issue number 121, which I kind of like, but then there's some where I just still have a lot of these zines left. These are all issue number 121. And once they get a certain, a long time ago or a certain age, they don't really sell as much. Oh, I also have, okay, this is kind of cool. This is where I put all the like misprints. So for a while I was really, so it's like ones where there aren't covers. So I just have this whole thing is filled with like stuff, mostly just that there weren't, I can't really see, there weren't as many covers as there were inside. So there's a bunch of those. But for a while I was really into labeling them as misprints. And then, some of them are pretty misprinty. But like issue number 59, which was a really good issue, and of course I don't have any more of them, but all I have are this misprint issue. And I think it's from having a printmaking background, but I was really into, I don't know if you can really see, I was really into just preserving the misprinted stuff. So I have this one that's barely legible, but then I have some that are just like a little bit printed badly, like this one. It just was hard to get that one. I wanted it in the right place. But yeah, the inside is totally unreadable. It's like some kind of like Dada poetry. I don't know what it is. But anyway, this whole thing is like filled with misprints. This is the type of thing that, I always, well, I don't always, but like sometimes I think about like how when I die, my son's going to just inherit all kinds of weird stuff. And one of the weird things is going to be just like weird misprinted copies of my zine. What else? Okay, what are some other things that are interesting? Some other things that I found recently was I printed these Ker-bloom, I letterpress printed these Ker-bloom stickers. I mean, probably over 20 years ago, a really long time ago, and I just had them in a box somewhere, and I just recently found them. So stuff like that happens to me, where I find things that I put away 20 years ago. Other things people like to see. This is the composing stick. I'm not really going to like set type or do any of that stuff. Okay, there's some good questions coming up. I'm glad people are asking questions. This is the composing stick where I set type. And then this is the pica rule. So it has different ways to measure things. And part of it is I use it to measure, like you measure the height of type, you measure the length of the line. I mean, it's also just a ruler. So I use it for measuring whether or not something is like a 1/16 of an inch off this way or that way. My friend Sean in Pittsburgh would always say, when the pica rule comes out, I know I'm about to witness perfection. So those are some tools of the trade. Someone asked if I have any copies of issue 1. I do. I think I can probably find that in a little bit. I have this box where I keep one of everything, because people ask that too. They're like, oh, do you have one of everything? And it's like, I do have one of everything. Also, I number my editions, and that's also from a printmaking background. So for, years, so many, I don't know, like maybe 20, maybe almost 20 years, I would hand number them, like pencil hand number them, every single one. And then at some point, someone gave me a whole bunch of these, like they're numbering machines, and they go on the press bed, and when you print, it has this little spring mechanism that advances it a number. So it basically like does consecutive numbering, and you just have it letterpress printed. So now on the cover, I can't believe when I realized that. It's like that saves me so much time, because I just have the machine number it. And people are often really interested in getting low numbers on the numbering. That's interesting to people. Like if they end up with like number 4 out of 250, they get excited. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the 4th one that was printed. It just means it's the 4th one that was numbered. Or now in this case, it means it was the 4th cover that was printed. But I always keep number 1. That's just sort of a thing I do. As far as, so I have a copy of every issue of Ker-bloom. I don't entirely know if anybody else does. I know there have been people who have subscribed for decades, you know. There are people who definitely have, or, you know, I think they have a lot up until a point. There are some academic collections that have them all. The Labadie collection at University of Michigan, I'm pretty sure has them all. It's possible Mills College has them all. And then there's zine libraries like the Independent Publishers Resource Center in Portland, and they may have, I mean, they have, there's a lot of places where they have most of them. Oh, there's also the volume sets. So, gosh, where are the volume sets? I think I see them. Hang on just a sec. I should have come up with a little sign that said, be back in 5 minutes. It's not going to be 5 minutes. It's going to be like 3 seconds. Hang on. But, oh, I can't get it. It's stuck back there too far. There's a milk crate and they have volume sets. That's not it. Okay. I think I have a volume set here. I do. I have one. So this is what a hardcover volume set looks like of my zine. It started off I can't tell if it's backwards. So it's Booklyn. They're an artist, sort of a book artist nonprofit in Brooklyn. And they started doing a thing that they would hand bind sets of my zine. And they did, I think, so this is volume 4. They would have, they would basically teach bookbinding classes to interns by having them just bind these things. And they did 4 sets of 21. So this last one ends in 2010. And then I had sent them another set, and then I sort of didn't hear back for a number of years. And eventually I asked them, and they just said they don't really, that isn't really a program that they do anymore. So they sent me this whole box of my zines back, and I said, well, I'll bind them, you know. I feel like I have a certain amount of perfectionism and like attention to detail, like enough for letterpress, but not enough for bookbinding. I'm realizing I'm just kind of a little bit too sloppy to be a good bookbinder. I'm an okay bookbinder, but I'm not like a great bookbinder. So I basically just looked at I have some background in bookbinding, but I sort of looked at what they did. They did, you know, this is the 4th, and they're like these little bricks. But I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, I think I know what stitch they use by how this is. So I should have gotten these out. So I did. Hang on. Okay. So I bound the ones that they sent back. I bound these together, and there's like 40 of these. So last summer when the pandemic, this was my pandemic project, was I had all of these things. They weren't sewn together. They were just, you know, put in these little bundles. And I was like, oh, pandemic, perfect thing to do. So I bound, like, I spent the whole summer, like, you know, every day. I think I could do like one, I can't remember how many I did a day, 1 or maybe 2 a day. And I sewed every single one of these, and I just, you know, I don't know, I binge watched Lord of the Rings or something and just like put all these together. And then, you know, there's a hardcover. And so I glued these hardcovers. I'm still gluing the hardcovers. So this is sort of partially glued on. And then I'm a really sloppy gluer, as it turns out. And so once I do that, and I get all of those done, I basically glue the whole thing together, and it'll be another volume set. And then once I finish that, I will be ready to do the next volume set, because I have enough, it's been enough time that I'll have the next volume set. And then I've also figured out that once I finish that volume set, it'll be time to do the next volume set. So I'm just going to be binding forever. Let's see. Oh, I have linoleum blocks. Sometimes these are for my print of the month, but these I do. And then sometimes, like this was on the cover of my zine once. So that's that. What else? Oh, in my Etsy shop, it's not exactly one of every zine, but you can there's this thing, I call it the instant collection, and you can buy one of every zine that I still have copies of. And so this is what that looks like. So I basically put this in a, priority box, and that's one of everything I have. And so that's kind of neat, because every once in a while someone buys that and then they get to just binge read my entire life, which is kind of, when I think about it, it's sort of weird because my entire adult life has been documented. I started this when I was 23, and I didn't think that I would be still doing the zine 25 years later. Yeah, so it is weird to think of, my whole adult life. Obviously not everything. I haven't written about everything in my life. I've done other things. Let's see, what else? So I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a while. And one cool thing there is they have this place called Artist Imaging Resource Center that it's basically like a screen printing kind of cooperative space. But one thing that they used to have was open studio. So for $5, you could go, and they would have screens that their volunteers had already put emulsion on, and they would burn a screen for you. And then you could, bring your own ink and print. As long as you brought your own ink and paper, you could print as much as you wanted to. And so when I moved to Pittsburgh, it just seemed like every cool event had really cool, screen printed posters. So for a while I got really into screen printing when I was there. So I would do, I decided, like, I got like minorly obsessed with the book Watership Down, and I had this whole idea. So I just went there and I was like, oh, I'm going to make some Watership Down posters. Okay. And I got into doing combining screen printed images with letterpress printed text. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do this event, and it's going to be like a reading group followed by a screening of the movie. And I'll just do a 3-color screen printed and letterpress printed poster, because why not? It's Pittsburgh. Why not? And then I also did what is it called? Like posters for my business, which is kind of this sweet. I always think it's like some kind of peppermint candy rainbow roll or something, because it's like, why not? Okay, so I guess a couple questions. Someone was asking about type. So I did hand set the type for the first 17 years. And that's really time consuming. I use Caslon, that's the typeface I use. And the reason I used it was because it was the only one that was roughly the right size and I had enough of. And so I used it just over and over and over again. And it really wore down, which gave it some charm, but also sometimes made it kind of a little unreadable. And also this thing would happen, and some of you that have read the zine long enough may remember this, is I only had enough type to print half of it, and then I had to print that, and then I had to take the type apart, and then I had to reset the last 2 pages and print those. Or sometimes this thing would happen where I had almost enough type to set the whole thing at one time, but not quite. So I would say ran out of typeface change, and I would just switch and do a totally different typeface for the last few paragraphs. Or I would have to start rewriting the ending, because it would be especially if I was talking in the past tense a lot, I would find that I was starting to run out of W's, lowercase W's, because I was saying was and were and stuff. So I would have to start rewriting things so that I could not use all the W's, or I would sometimes start to put stuff in all caps, like it was, because it's like, oh, I don't want to have to like unset this and do this another day. I want to just do it all at once. And then when my son was a toddler, it just got to be too much. Like I just didn't have enough time. It's really time consuming to set all the type, and I'm pretty fast at it. I think, you know, there was a time when people, you know, people just set type, that was their job. And I am not as fast as they were, but I'm probably pretty fast for modern day people. But it just took a long time. So I started using polymer plates. So I would do everything on InDesign and I would send it out for plates and get plates made. And my plan was, well, I'll do that until my child is old enough to go to school. And once he goes to school, I'll have time again and I'll switch back. But what, you know, my son's 9 now. What I found is that it's hard to switch back. Once you switch into something that's a lot less time consuming, it's hard to switch back. So I still use polymer plates. I still use Caslon as the font, because just to be consistent, but I do still use handset type for the covers, and also for the, it's hard to describe it, for the title page, I still use handset type for that. The reason, another question I get sometimes is why my zine is that size, and that is because it's 1/4 of 8.5 by 11. So for one piece of cover stock, I get 2 covers. And for one piece of paper, I get 1 zine. And so it just seemed like a good size, and it is a good size. Oh, what's the other question I get? Is how many, like how big of editions? They started off at 250. And again, that was because paper comes in, like cardstock comes in 200, cover stock comes in 250. And paper stock comes in packs of 500. And so it really was just, I just cut it in half. And then there was some years where I just was like selling out of them like right away. And so I thought, gosh, you know, zine's so popular. I'm going to start making 500. And so I started using like an entire one. So I started doing 500. What I found was my zine isn't 500 popular. It might be 250 popular, but it's not 500 popular. And so that year I have just a lot of zines. So then I kind of backed it down to 300, and that was okay for a while. But then I just realized I would rather run out than have boxes left over. So I went back down to 250. And I love it. When I sell out of a zine, I really like it. It does end up being that it's the really good ones, or the ones that I wish, sometimes I wish that I could share zines with people, but those were the ones that sold out really quickly. So I don't have them anymore. But yeah, I would always rather, sometimes at zine fairs, if I have like a last one, people are like, well, I don't want to take your last one. It's like, please take my last one. I would rather you have it than I have it. I've already read it. I know what's in it. I want you to have it. Let's see. Okay, so this bin right here is sort of my bin of one of everything. It has, what does it have? Oh, it has my last copy of the Ker-bloom album. I know, that's another thing. I had so many of these. I once made a record, you know, like you do. I made this in 1996. I recorded it. I didn't know anything about recording, and I recorded it. Who can even remember anymore? But I sprung for clear vinyl. It was a lot more money, or it was more money. And once I realized that clear vinyl was possible, I think I saw clear vinyl as a kid. I remember my sister showing me it was a Exploited record, and it was clear vinyl, and I was like, what? So when I did my own record, it was like, I have to do clear vinyl. I love it. And it is recordings of me and other people reading issues 8 and 9. And the reason it was 8 and 9 was because those were the most recent at the time. So I letterpress printed. Okay, so I letterpress printed the front. This was just some random like halftone. It is like an illustration from a newspaper. I also was really into Braille. I was mildly obsessed with Braille. It's like my life is just sort of this history of mild obsessions. So I have a Braille typewriter. It's at my house. And so I learned Braille because I knew someone who was blind, and I wanted to do Braille to like, well, it's not really translating, but I wanted to type in Braille so that he could read it in Braille. So I learned Braille. Who does that? Who learns Braille just to type for one person? Me. So this is Ker-bloom in Braille. I typed it. And I have, there's a little insert. Okay, this one does have an insert. So it has the insert, which has like, you know, who read it aloud. So one is me and two other people reading aloud, and the other people reading aloud were the ones who just recorded it in their living room. And it just seemed super high tech to me. And I played accordion apparently in the background. I don't remember that, but I did. And then the other one is me reading, and then the person, so one of these zines is about a breakup with somebody. And then by the time I did the record, I asked that person to play the music in the background, to compose a musical thing for the background. The whole record, I think it's like, I think it's like 6 or 7 minutes aside, something like that. But then it's all typed. I translated the whole thing into Braille and typed it all by hand in Braille. That's how I roll. What else is in here? This was the time. This was the little thing from when there was an ALA conference. Was in San Francisco one year, and I got to table, which was really fun. Oh, so remember the time I did a cookbook? I did a letterpress printed cookbook. I know. Can we do this all day? Yes, I could do this all day. I was realizing last night at 2 a.m. when I woke up and was thinking of all the cool stuff, like I was like, I could do a series. I don't think I can just stop in like, an hour or whatever. So I did a cookbook one year because I think I just was like, oh, you know what I've never done is I've never done a cookbook. I should do a cookbook. And so I had other people, I should have brought my glasses, other people and I did linoleum blocks, and I had other people and me submit recipes and then stories. And my whole point of it was that it would be a recipe, but then it would also be an image and like a story. I wanted it to be more than just like, oh, here's a recipe. So there's always a little story there. And yeah. Okay. Anyway. Gosh, now I just want to read. Now I'm just going to be reading my cookbook. And then because I'm also extra, so I did this in editions of 100. So this is number 1 of 100. I did have it professionally spiral bound, but I got this, and then I got this idea from Johnny Bruton, who did Bagazine, which I used to do some letterpress printing for. He had this whole thing where sometimes he would do stuff instead of numbering them, he would letter them. So for stuff that had a really, that he wanted to have a really low edition number, he would letter them. So I made a hardcover edition of the cookbook. So the hardcover edition was spiral or was ring bound, and clearly also this is evidence of how I'm not a super professional bookbinder. But it had, the cover was 2 colors. And I think there was also, I had signatures from everybody who participated, for every artist. So every artist that participated signed this, all the copies. And so it ended up me having to just like ship that page around to a bunch of people. There was a lot involved. I also did, because I'm a little bit extra, this Ker-bloom zine, audio zine ensemble. And I probably haven't untied this knot in a long time. But this was, I made this whole thing where the record's in the middle and then issues 8 and 9 are on the outside. And I have no idea how many I made of those. I really don't. Oh, it says 5. It said I made 5. It's an edition of 5. I guess I sold them. I don't know what I did with them. I probably like sold them for like $10 at a zine fair. I've never been good at pricing. I always price things too low. I did. Ooh, let's see if I can find the letterpress printed comic book I made. I made a comic book once. And my friend Tin insisted I was gonna, I was trying to figure out pricing, and Alternative Press Expo was coming up, and Tin was like, if I see you selling this for any less than $30, I will be mad. And I was like, okay, $30 it is. And of course it flew out the door at $30, and I should have charged $50. But again, okay, here it is. Again, I'm terrible at pricing things. This was the time that I letterpress printed a comic book, because of course I did. It's accordion. This, I think, actually, my book binding is pretty good. So it's multiple colors, and it's accordion fold. So this is, the inside is like 2 pieces of paper. And how many of these? 40. I made 40 of these. And so it's basically, the premise of this book is that like Godzilla type creatures, like big creatures from movies that are like dinosaurs, are actually not Japanese, but that they are Korean, and that during the annexation of Korea, where people were not allowed to speak Korean, they had to speak Japanese. They all lost their names, and they had to learn, because they were not allowed to speak their own names. That was the other thing. You weren't allowed to have your own names. So this is all of the creatures waking up, from imperialism and speaking their true names. And this was because offhandedly at a party, someone was talking about like Godzilla and other like kind of, I guess there's other dinosaur-like creatures like that. I don't know much about it. And I joked and said, oh, well, they were all Korean and they all had to learn different names under the annexation. You realize that. And he kept telling me that's not true. And so I said, well, I'll show you. And so I showed him. I was right, because I made that thing. Okay, what else? Someone wanted to see issue number 1, so that's what I'm going to look for. Each time I do one, I just pile it in there. And let's see, what do I have? Oh gosh. So this is one of those things that I should have planned out ahead of time, because I'm not sure how I'm going to find issue number 1. Next time I plan it out, right? I know, and it's funny because I'm like kind of an over planner. At some point I started doing volume sets. This was before Bookland. Well, maybe that's not true. I started doing volume sets of just like each per year. And I used, this is kind of like it's similar to the Bookland ones, but instead of a hardcover, you actually take a piece of cardstock and you fold it over and glue it down onto the tapes. You can kind of see there. And it's sort of like a fake hardcover, and it's super easy. It's a really easy fake hardcover. And then I also did like by subject matter. So all of the zines I did about the state of Ohio are in this. Anyway. Oh, that's what I should find. Good idea. We'll see if I can find, oh no, I can find it. No, I can't find it. I did a letterpress printing tour where I drove across the country and printed in different people's letterpress shops across the country and back, because of course I did that. What's something I haven't done? What's something I haven't done? I'll do it. And somewhere I have those zines. I don't know where. Maybe this is it. Oh, here it is. And I put the last of them all together in this little set. That's the 1991 printing tour. So the first issue I printed in Tucson. I printed the whole thing in Tucson at Fred Woodworth, who does the zine, The Match. And so the inside is actually offset printed. He has offset presses and letterpresses. So this is the first. So this was pasted up and done with a non-digital. This was all done non-digitally. He doesn't do anything digitally. So this was all pasted up, and the type was kind of set in a way. I mean, it's offset, but it was typed on. You see how it has justified edges, but it's typed on a typewriter. And so you may ask, how do you get justified edges if you're typing on a typewriter? And it's amazing, and it's all non-digital. So it's this system where you type it on this one computer, or not computer, it's like a typewriter. It's like an electric typewriter, and it makes this punch tape, an actual punch tape that's recording somehow with dots, with punch dots, not only what you're typing, but the width of all the things that you're typing with spaces. And then it figures out mechanically with this set of gears how big the spaces need to be so that the edges will end up being justified. And so you do your whole thing. I mean, I typed this whole thing out, and then you take this reel of punch tape and you put it into a different electric typewriter, and then you just run the punch tape, and it just types itself, kind of like a player piano, just, it types itself, and it types it with justified edges because it works by gears. It's amazing. And then, I pasted in clip art that he randomly had. And then the next issue, I think the outside was printed in Nashville at Hat Show Print. And that there, anyways, I could go on and on. And then the inside was partially printed. Where was this? I think the inside was printed in Portland at the Independent Publishing Research Center. I know. And then this part was printed at the Dard Hunter home in Ohio. And it's basically, I was using a press. I was using like one of those hand presses. When you see a really old picture where it's like, it's almost the same technology as like a wine press where they're, you roll it in. I had to ink it by hand. Each of those I had to ink by hand, put this thing down, and then pull this crank down. And the pressure was basically how much I could pull down. And then I would roll it out, and then I would take that piece of paper out, and then I would ink it up again. And then I would put the next piece of paper down. I remember it was like 105 degrees or something. It was really hot. I was like wearing a bathing suit or something. Yeah, and then the third one, the outside was printed at in Kansas City at Hammer Press, and then I'm pretty sure the inside I printed back in Berkeley because I think by that time I was home. So that's something I did in my life. Oh, I did one on protests. I forgot that I did that. It's like a little thing exploding. Who remembers what they do anymore? There's also sometimes that I find that I can't always remember what I did in my life, and then I can read a scene and I can remember. Anyway, this was the 100th issue of my zine. I had a party. I lived in Pittsburgh at the time, and I had a party, and there was this local band called the Awful Waffles, and I thought they were really cool. And so I asked them if they would play my show. So they played my show. And then I was like, oh, it'd be really great to have like waffles. And so I had all these waffle irons. And so I was like making people waffles. And oh, here's the other thing that happened during that party. I bought a house during the party. I was kind of trying to get this one house. And it was me and my agent, and then the seller and their agent, and we were really haggling over prices. And they were really trying to go hard, and it was sort of this thing of like me talking to my agent and giving him a number at this party with the Huffle Waffles playing, and I'm running out of the room going, okay, this is my highest max. And then, he has to call this other people, and they have to call the couple who's in their 90s or something. And eventually I bought a house during that party. Oh, good times. What else is funny? What is this? I don't know what this is. I don't even know what this is. Okay, I'm not gonna look at it because I don't know what it is. This is something cool. It doesn't have any zines in it. I don't know where they went, but I made this box for the first 2 years, and I sold this box set. And so what it used to be was year 1, issues 1 through 6 went in here, and then issues 7 through 12 went in here, and then it was in this box set. And as further evidence too, I'm an okay bookbinder, but I am not a great bookbinder, because this like kind of fits and kind of doesn't. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should eat cake now? I don't know. I feel like I've been talking a lot. That happens to me. I talk a lot. I had a lot of caffeine. I can have a lot of sugar. This is going to be great. Oh, no, of course, I have to talk more. Of course, I can't eat cake when I could probably talk more. No, you know what I'm going to do? Is I'm going to cut the cake first. And I'm going to eat cake first. I don't know if we should sing. We could. If anybody's nearby, you can come over and I'll give you some cake. I know that there's a lot of local bakeries I could have gotten a vegan cake from, but the Berkeley Bowl is a lot closer to my studio. It was a good cake. And this is what people wanted. This is what Kelsey said. I would totally watch you just eat cake. I was thinking at 2 a.m. about zine fests. And I was trying to remember, like, people keep texting me. Like when they started, kind of, and like when the first one I went to, because there was this period of time that there were a lot of zine fests when it just really, zine fest really blew up. It was pretty good. Yeah, 2000 in New York. Karen is saying. Yeah, I mean, the first anarchist book fair I went to, I think, was in 1996. Oh, there's apparently a kind of live streaming where you watch people eat. So in 1996 was when I went to my first anarchist book fair. And I probably started tabling there in either 97 or 98, maybe. And also I would sell at the Letterpress Printers Fair. There was this, San Francisco Letterpress Printers Fair, and it was huge. And so I would sell both places. And I remember they were always right around the same time. And I was always worried they'd be on the same day, when really I was probably the only person that tabled both of those events. But my cross-country trip was in 1999. And I think that was the first year of the Bowling Green Zine Festival, I think it was called, in Bowling Green, Ohio, by the people that ended up starting Climber magazine. Because in 2000, I think, if I remember correctly, that's the first, they changed their name to the Underground Publishing Conference. And that was the first year I went to that. So I flew to Ohio to go to a zine fest. And I think that was the first zine fest that I went to. And I went, this is why I went. Okay, so there was this zine fest, and I thought, oh, well, that'll be cool. And then that was on one side of Ohio. And then there was a magazine at the time that was letterpress printed. I sort of knew where all these letterpress printed magazines were. That was called Plain Magazine, and it was done by these people who came out of the deep ecology movement, but then ended up becoming Quakers. And like the type of Quakers that are like considered plain folks. So they started doing a magazine called Plain that was about plain living. And they had a conference that was a plain conference. And it was on the other side of Ohio, and it was a week later. So I thought to myself, well, I could go to this zine conference, I could bike across the state of Ohio, and then I could attend this other conference. That sounds like a cool thing to do. And so that's what I did, was I went to this zine conference. It was super fun. It was really the first kind of conference like that I had been to, and we all like camped out and like ate pizza, and it just, I don't know. It was super fun. And then I was like, well, I don't know. I don't want to like fly my bike out there. That just seems too weird. And so I thought, okay, well, I bet I'll find a bike. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So I planned this whole thing that all involved, the key part was I had to find a bike in this town. And I was like, it's a college town. And it's true. I did. There was like someone who was like, oh yeah, someone moved out like 5 years ago and they left this bike and it doesn't have brakes, but if you put brakes on it, you can take it. And I was like, great, that sounds perfect. So I, replaced the brakes on this little yellow 10-speed and just biked across the state of Ohio for a week to go to this conference where, that was the first time that I'd met like Amish people and Mennonites. And that was really this different sort of shift. So then the next year, so 2001, I think then would have been the first year of the San Francisco Zine Fest. And that one, there was this person, Jen, who just decided, oh, I'll do a San Francisco Zine Fest, and organized it all by herself in this space called South Space. That was this cool like warehouse space that now is condos. Darn you developers. But then the next year, me and a couple other people got involved, and, so she wouldn't have to do it by herself 2 years in a row. So this was, I made a letterpress printed poster, because you do. That was for the zine kickoff show. That was at the Long Hall. So it was Saturday, September 7th, 2002, 8 p.m. And it doesn't even say who's reading. I don't even know if we knew who was reading. I just said, Bay Area zine publishers will read their work. Join the fun by reading or by listening. Zine Fest will be the next day in San Francisco. Yeah, and then suddenly kind of after that, it seemed like there were a lot of Zine Fests. I think probably Portland, my guess, has started around the same time, so 2000 in New York. Yeah, Chicago probably started around the same time. And then suddenly everyone was having a Zine Fest. And that's cool. Since having a kid, I haven't gone to too many. I've done San Francisco and DC. I went to DC Zine Fest when my son was a baby. And that was fun because I took this little onesie and I screen printed I Heart Zines on the front of it. And, I'm finding out that DC also started in 2000. And then I got to just like basically sell zines with like a baby strapped to the little, my little front carrier. It was very cute. I also met Ian Mackay, as you do when you're in DC. I've done tours. Tours are fun. Anything else? Anything else? I'll just eat cake if not. We're kind of coming up on an hour almost, like 10 minutes left. Probably after an hour, people start to, their eyes glaze over. They all wish they were eating cake. If you have cake at your house right now, I invite you to eat cake at your house right now. Some other interesting things. Maybe I should look at that thing that I don't know what it is. but I think I found this one. I think it's about people that I dated. Oh, well. Next. Oh, there was this time. Oh, let's see. Another question. Oh, that's a good question. It's similar to a question I get a lot. The question was, do you think you'll reach 50th anniversary? Do it for another 25. Maybe, you know, the question I do get a lot is, do you ever think about stopping? And the answer to that question is yes, all the time. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, and probably 24 out of those 25, I've been considering not doing it anymore. By the way, you can see that in the background is the printing press, or that's part of it. You know, there's every time there's something like, you know, issue number 100, that was a big thing, because it was like, you could just go out at 100, like no one would blame you. Like 100 is a nice number, and you could just say, I did 100. And then I was maybe going to do that, and then I didn't. And then it was like 120, because 120 is 20 years. And so I thought, okay, 20 years, that's also a nice number, you know, you could stop. And the same thing with 25 was like, well, 25 years, like you know. And I can't seem to stop. Like I sometimes think like, yeah, I'll just keep doing my zine until for whatever reason I can't anymore. There was this guy that used to do this little letterpress zine, and he started it when he was, you know, like, because when he grew up, you know, boys learned letterpress printing in like middle school and high school, and so he started doing a little publication then, and he did it up until he was something like in his 80s, and he stopped, and he and I used to trade stuff, and he wrote a letter just saying, I can't actually, my fingers don't work enough to pick up the type anymore, and I'm starting to not be able to see, and so, you know, he had to stop. And then I think he passed away not that long after that. But so then I always think, well, I could just do that and just do it until I can't actually do it anymore, or until my child wants to pick up the mantle. When my son was, I think, like 5 or something like that, he said, well, you do your zine as long as you want to, and when you're ready to stop, then I'll start doing it. I don't know that he'll actually do it, but you never know. You know, it's like sometimes when I think about stopping, I think it's just like, I have been doing this my whole adult life. Sometimes I feel like I have a lot of identity invested in it. And then it's like, well, if I stop doing this zine, who would I be? I know other people make a transition to some other thing, you know. I've often thought like, well, if I'm not putting in the time writing this, maybe I would just like write a book. But maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I wouldn't write a book. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not ready to stop now. So who knows? Maybe at 30 years. I don't know. Some more cake. I just dropped some cake on the floor. I think it'd be fun to do more like live events, maybe without the cake. I did that mini like Instagram live one, and that was kind of neat because I could do it on my phone, and I could just sort of walk around more and not just sit in one place. I also recently, so I do wholesale greeting cards, and I sometimes have to order really fancy paper. And I just had to order a whole bunch of really fancy paper. And it's all in these really big parent sheets. And so I was going through all this paper, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do, is I want to do some kind of like live event where I'm just like going through this really fabulous, beautiful paper. That, I mean, that would be a lot of fun. I do, for a long time, I was doing wedding invitations. That was my primary income, was wedding invitations. And I think the thing I liked the most about that was getting to do paper shopping sprees, because, you know, the client, you're billing the client for it. But being able to just go someplace and just drop $300 or $400 on paper was really nice, or just order this big thing of really expensive paper. That was the best part about that job. Well, I think in like 5 minutes, it'll be an hour. So any last questions or things you want to see besides me eating more cake? Now would be the time to do it. I have an Etsy shop. You can buy things there. I have a Patreon. You can, so where there you can subscribe to the zine, and it just sort of bills you every month. You can also join the letterpress print of the month club. And so you get a letterpress print every month. And you can, for a combo level, you can get the zine, which is every other month, and the print, which is every month. Did you know? You didn't. But I'm going to ask you. Did you know that when I first started doing my zine, I thought, oh, I'll do it every other month until I kind of get the hang of it. And then I'll switch to every month. Like, I'm just going to get started at every other month. And it was clear, like, you know, 6 or 8 months in, that like even every other month is really hard to keep as a schedule. I can't believe I thought that I could do it every month. I also, in the beginning, here's the other thing. When I first started my zine, I thought, well, I'll just do a different cover every time. And then once I get a cover I like, I'll just do that and just change the number. I don't know why I thought that, because making the cover is definitely the best part about doing the zine. My favorite part about doing the zine is designing a new cover every month or every other month. And that's also why it's handy having the zines up here, because I can kind of look at them and be like, okay, like what color, you know, what color cover haven't I done in a while? Or I could kind of look at the covers and be like, okay, well, this one looks a little bit too much like those other ones. What haven't I done recently? That's helpful. Well, I'm glad people could attend. I know it was in the middle of the day, so a lot of people who are working couldn't attend, or that, you know, there are probably people working right now who are both working and watching this at the same time. I won't tell your bosses. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who's read my zine, whether it's, you know, just a few issues or whether you've been reading it for years and years and years. Thanks to everyone who will be watching this later, watching me eat cake. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Do you have like 1 more minute? I was told by my child to only eat 1 piece and that he wanted the rest, and he might be a little disappointed. Drink some coffee too. Yes, I use a Christmas mug. All right. Well, thanks again. Have a good rest of your day.